On our plugin widgets page, we can see that our plugin currently has one setting. That setting is the title. What we're going to do now is add in a few more settings. First, we're going to display how many badges the current user has. Then, we're going to put out a field where they can enter in the number of badges they want to display. Finally, we'll put a checkbox asking them if they want tooltips to appear along with the badges on the front end. We could start in our widgetfields.php file, which determine what forms will display in the widget area here. We'll come back into our widgets field file and then open up the same file in the project downloads. Go ahead and copy that code, come back into our current file, delete, and replace it with the new code. We could see the title part was the same, and now we're echoing out a count of all of the person's badges, asking them how many of their badges they'd like to display, and then giving them an input field where they can enter in the number of badges that they'd like. Below that, we'll have a checkbox asking them if they'd like to display tooltips. By default, we're going to set the value equal to yes and use a special function of checked to make sure that the field is marked checked if that's what the person had saved for their settings. Now we can come back into our main plugin file and scroll down until we find the widget area and the function for form. We saw that it was pretty simple to add those new fields to the widget fields file. Likewise, it's going to be really simple to add them into our form code so that they get processed correctly. In the same way that we're getting the title of the particular widget instance, we could also use this to get the number of badges and whether they want to display tooltips. To do this, we'll copy this code here, paste it below, and simply update it to say num badges. We'll copy that and replace title. The next one we'll do will be display badges. Which again we'll copy and place here. Since we're displaying the number of badges along with the widget settings, we're going to have to pull in the profile information of the person. We've done this many times before, and we could just come up to a place where we've done this, copy that code, and paste it down into our form. Now, unlike working with the options table that we have been, where we have to manually update this information ourselves, WordPress will update all of these values that we display as widget settings. To make sure these save, though, we're going to have to come up and update our update function. To do this is pretty simple as well. We'll copy this code, come down, and then change the values to num badges, and then to display badges. Finally, we'll come up to our widget function where we'll pull in the num badges and display badges to help us with the output on the front end of the site. To do this, we won't be using the apply filters like we did for the title. Instead, we'll simply create the variable and then set it equal to the instance and then num badges. We'll copy this code and then use it for display tooltips. Even if this format doesn't make perfect sense, you should now know that all you have to do to add new widget settings is simply add them to the form, the update, and then the widget function. Of course, in our forms, we also have the same values being used. Now we have to look at how the code is going to display on the front end. But first, let's test to see if our new widget settings are working in the back end. We'll come into our site, refresh the page, and then click to see if we have these extra fields displaying. We can see that we have our title, the total badges, a field asking how many we would like to display, and then the option for tooltips. Let's go ahead and enter in some values to see if they save properly. We'll say 8 badges, and we would like to display tooltips. It looks like display tooltips didn't save properly. If we come back and look at the code, we can see the reason for this is that I was actually typing display badges instead of display tooltip. Let's go ahead and change this and quickly replace it in all the instances. Come to our front end again, refresh the page, and see that now our options for tooltips are saving properly. Now let's turn our attention to getting the code to work properly for displaying on the front end of the site. Let's come back in and take a look at our front end code. Currently, we can see that we're displaying the title and the profile name. The code that we're going to use to display all of the badges along with their titles and projects is very similar to the code that we use to display the badges inside of the plugin settings page. For this reason, we're going to go ahead and copy and paste in some completed code here, and then go ahead and look at how the loop and the list items and the badge information is displaying. Go ahead and copy the code from the project downloads front-end file and paste it into the open file here. Let's take a look at the very top, and we could see that again we're echoing out what should be displayed before the widget, before the title, and then after the title. At the very bottom, we have what should be echoing out after the widget. Inside of here, the basic structure is an unordered list, a for loop, a list item, the image for the badge, and then an if statement asking if the tooltip should be displayed, and then if it is, go ahead and display all of the markup for the tooltip. The one thing, though, that's very different between this and the other loop we created for the settings page is the for loop here. When we displayed the badges in the plugin settings page, what we actually did was start with their very first badge and then count forward to their 20th badge. What we're doing here, and what we should have been doing, is we start with their very last badge and then count backwards from there. The logic here is saying get the total number of badges, which we've done before by counting the badges information in the profile, and then we'll set I equal to total badges minus 1 to offset how PHP uses a 0 index for arrays. Then we'll say while I is greater than or equal to the total number of badges they have minus the number of badges they want to display, echo out the following code. The last segment, I minus minus, means to count backwards each time instead of I plus plus, which would be to count forward. So we could see again here that we're starting with the total number of badges and then counting backwards until we get the number of badges away from their total badges that they want to display. We also want this to work the same on the plugin settings page. So let's copy this code we have here, come back in to our options wrapper page, scroll down to our for loop, paste in our code, delete the previous loop, and then instead of using the variable numbadges, we could hardcode in the number 20 because we know that we're only going to be displaying their 20 most recent badges. Now, let's come in to our plugin settings page and make sure it's working properly. Sure enough, we could see that instead of displaying the newbie badge first, it's displaying the most recent badge Mike the Frog has earned. Now that we have it working here in the settings page, let's come back and double check our widget settings. See that we want to display 8 badges. We'll turn tooltips on, and then we'll save the widget. We can then come into the front end of the site, and we can see that our widgets are displaying along with their descriptions. It looks like we have one missing image here, and if we come into the front end of our code, and we can see that sure enough we're displaying an image called Treehouse Logo Demo. Let's go ahead and copy this over from our project files and paste it in to our image files for our current site. Now we can come back to the front end, refresh it, and we see the logo appearing. Let's go back and try to edit our plugin settings to see if we could get a different number of badges to display and remove the tooltip information that's displaying below. We'll come into our widget, change the number to 4, and uncheck Display Tooltips. When we save this and come back into our site, we should see that we're no longer displaying tooltips and we have 4 of the most recent badges. If you look in your project downloads folder, you'll also find a file front-end embedded CSS. Go ahead and open that up and then copy the code, come back into your frontend.php file, and then paste the code at the very top of the page. The reason that we're using embedded CSS here to apply some basic styling is because we actually need to add some more code into our plugin file in order to properly link to external style sheets on the front end of the site. For now, we'll just use this and go ahead and take a look at what it looks like on the front end. If we come back, go and edit our widget settings, and turn the tooltips on, when we come back and look at the page, we can now see that we have some really simple styled tooltips. At this point, we have all of the coding done to create a widget, add settings, and then display content from it on the front end of a site. What we need now, though, is a little help from the designer to polish off the front end styling. I have a buddy of mine who I think would be perfect to help with this. I'm going to go ahead and reach out to him now. Hey there, Gil.
Hey, Zach, what's going on?
Well, we're working on a WordPress badges plugin to show off our profile information on a WordPress site, and we could use a little help with the front-end CSS design.
Oh, yeah? What you working with?
Well, we have something that looks like this. And you can see we have our badges, and we have somewhat of a tooltip here, but we want to make it look a little nicer and align more with the treehouse design.
Okay, that makes sense. I think I can help you out with that. Now, will I just be editing the CSS theme file like I would with other WordPress sites?
Well, actually, the style sheet is part of the plugin file architecture, but I should be able to set you up with access, and it'll make sense once you get in there.
Okay, cool. I think I can definitely help you out with that. Just set me up with access to the site, and I think I'll knock it out pretty quickly.
Thanks so much, man.
Of course, Zach. And we do have some great videos on learning how to do this with CSS.
Good point.